I am Dena, your career and life coach. Welcome again to the episode, and thank you so much for joining me. Today, I'm going to be talking about job application frequently asked questions. Throughout the years as a career coach, I've been asked many questions about the job application process, and I wanted to share some of those questions with you today and give you some best practices, some tips, and some do's and don'ts as you go throughout this job search process. So let's just jump right in. The first question that I've received a lot of times is, why are the job applications so long? Why do they make the application so long and so detailed? Well, the short answer is really because, they're asking questions that they're really interested in knowing. And employers can make the application be as long as they want and include whatever information they feel like they need to find out from you to get the information that they need to determine if you are the best candidate. So some applications are short and sweet, and some applications are going to take a little bit longer. It just depends on the particular job. But the thing about it is to remember is looking for a job is a job. So you definitely want to make sure that you have at least 30 minutes prepared on average per application to be able to fill it out to apply for the job. Because they may ask you to set up a profile, they may ask you to submit your resume, your cover letter, you may have to fill out an assessment. There are a number of different things that they may want you to do for that particular one job. So on average, I would just say be prepared to spend about 30 minutes per application. Question number 2, do I have to fill out the entire application? Well, no, you don't, because obviously, you can make that decision for yourself, but just keep in mind that this is part of your first impression with the employer, and they may feel like if you don't take the time to fill out their application, then why should they take the time to call you in for an interview? It kind of comes across like you may not be interested in the job if you don't fill out the application in its entirety. So again, going back to what I just mentioned, be prepared, take 30 minutes, have that 30 minutes prepared to sit down and fill out the application, and you want to fill it out as completely as possible. Sometimes with the application, they will allow you to stop and come back. So you may be able to pause it, and then you may come back later on if you'd like. So just keep that into consideration. And then once again, with the resume, keep in mind your resume is what you want them to know about you, but the application is what they want to know about you. So sometimes you may have to give them some additional information or what have you, but just make sure that you fill it out as completely as possible. And the question number 3 is, what if something on the application doesn't pertain to me? What if it doesn't, pertain to my skills and experience, or it doesn't pertain to, some experience that I have? You can simply write NA, or you can write not applicable. And that way, at least they know you read the question, you did take the time to, fill something out and say something, and you didn't just skip over the question. So writing NA or writing not applicable lets them know you did read the question, but it just doesn't apply to you. So again, making sure you're filling out the application, not skipping over questions, and you're trying to make it as complete as possible. The next question is, should I have my resume and cover letter prepared beforehand? I strongly recommend that you do have these things prepared beforehand and that you cater them for each particular position. Because whenever you are applying for a job, you want to make sure that your resume and your cover letter actually matches the job. You want to make sure that it matches the job description. So when I talked about that 30 minutes, that could be in there as well. That's also something you're going to have to prepare and be prepared to give some time to. Take the time to match your cover letter and your resume with the job. Have some of those keywords and key buzzwords from the job description actually on your resume when you upload it, because you're trying to beat out all the other candidates that are applying for the job as well. So you want to do whatever you can to make yourself stand out and to make yourself seem like the perfect candidate. And in terms of cover letters, do people read cover letters nowadays? I've had some recruiters tell me that they do, and some of them say they haven't read them in years. It just depends. So obviously, if it's mandatory for you to upload a cover letter, you want to make sure that you upload it. And if it's optional, then you can make that determination. If it's a job that you really, really want and you want to do everything that you can to give yourself a leg up over other people, so to speak, I would definitely recommend that you upload that cover letter. And if nothing else, make sure you remember to cater your resume and cover letter whenever you are applying for jobs. The next one is, what information do I need regarding previous jobs and my current jobs? Well, first of all, I would recommend that right now, while you are in the beginning of the job search process, or even before you even start, go ahead and make a list of all of your jobs, particularly the jobs that you've had over the last 10 years, because that's pretty much what they're going to want, or at least the last 3 or 4 positions that you've had. Go ahead and make a list, whether you want to write it down or you want to type it up, which, whatever way, just make sure that you have it so that whenever you're going to fill out these applications, that can kind of expedite the process a little bit if you just have it where you can readily fill it in or readily copy and paste. So you definitely want to have the name of the company, and you want to have their address. You definitely want to have your supervisor's name and title. You want to have your job title. You want to have the day you started and the day you ended, or if you're still working there, of course, you're going to just write present. You want to have your beginning salary and your ending salary. You want to have any of your accomplishments, and you want to have the reason why you left the job. You want to have all those things already readily. I have them already typed up for myself, and all I have to do is copy and paste. So it makes it a lot easier when I'm filling out job applications to just put that information right in there. So again, the last 10 years, or at least the last 3-4 positions, go ahead and have that information ready. The next question I've received throughout the years is, what if I work for a company that no longer exists, or my supervisor is no longer there? Well, you can still go ahead and put the name of the company and go ahead and put the company information. And if you're ever asked about that, you can always just let them know the company closed down, or that company is no longer in business, or what have you. And if the supervisor isn't there, then they can always reach out to human resources, because you can give them the information for your headquarters, and they can always get that information to verify that you were an employee, to verify, in fact, that you did work there and what your job title was. So just go ahead and give the information that you had at the time, and go ahead and give the information that you know. The next question is, should I submit my references at the same time as my application? Sometimes on applications, they make it mandatory, and they're going to require 3 references, and you want to make them professional. Sometimes I've seen where people have asked for a personal reference, but most of the time it's going to be professional. So you want to go ahead and have 3 people as a professional reference. And that could be a supervisor, that could be a colleague, that can be someone that you were in class with, a classmate. That can be a professor. That can be somebody in the community. That could maybe be a leader at your church. Just anybody that you've been in a relationship with for about a year that can speak to your character. They can speak to your work ethic, your personality. They can speak to, your skill set and your qualifications. I would go ahead and have their information, have their name, have where they work, have their phone number, their email address, and how long you've known them. Go ahead and have that written down as well. And then you can go ahead and give that at the time of the application if they're requiring it. If they're not requiring, then of course, you can always give that later on during the job search process. Maybe after your interview, when you send your thank you letter and you follow up, then you can upload those references then. And just make sure that whenever you are using somebody as a reference, definitely give them a heads up. Let them know you're going to be applying for a particular company, and they may hear from a representative from that company. And then go ahead and give them a copy of your resume as well, so that they have that in front of them whenever the person is calling and they're asking about you. And then one other thing about references, you can have a reference for different skill sets. So you may want someone to speak about your public speaking. You may want somebody else to speak about your team leadership. And then you may want somebody else to speak about your budget management, or, your project management, or something like that. You can have different references speak about different things. And when you reach out to them, you can ask them to speak to a certain area, so that whenever the employer is calling, they have a totality of your skills and your experience. The next question is, why do they ask you your graduation date from high school or from college? Well, my guess would be because they're trying to figure out how old you are, because most people graduate from high school at 17 or 18, and most people graduate from college at 21 or 22. And so if they have your graduation date, then of course they can figure out your age, and then they may be able to determine whether or not you're too old or too young, perceivably too old or too young, and then maybe they can make a determination. And that could be considered as, discrimination. But again, this is their job application, and they're asking the questions that they want to know. And I never fill it out unless it's mandatory, because I'm assuming they're trying to figure out my age. So unless it's mandatory, I would shy away from doing that. And if you are currently enrolled in a program and you haven't completed it, you can just put the expected graduation date. So you would just put expected May 2020 or expected, May 2021. I'm sorry, we're in 2021. May 2021, or you may put June 2022 or something like that. You can put the expected date if you haven't already completed it. And then the next one is, what should I put as my reason for leaving a job if I was fired, if I left due to a sickness, or I was laid off, or maybe I started my own business? So again, they're going to ask you this question on the application. It's pretty much standard, and you just want to be prepared for it, and you want to have an answer for it. So certainly if you were terminated for a job for something unfavorable, like you were fired or something like that, you don't have to put the reason on the application. You can put, "We'll discuss in the interview." You can put that on there, and that lets them know you're open to having a conversation if you get to the interview phase. And that way you can put it into context and you can tell a complete story about what happened rather than just listing the reason and then there's no context. So you can do that. If there was a reason, like maybe you left because of an illness or something like that, or anything in your personal life, that was requiring you to miss work or have to leave your job, you can explain it, be prepared to explain the circumstances, put it into context, and just let them know that you have fixed it. Maybe that was a situation at the time, but it has improved and it would no longer be an issue, and you're ready to move forward and make a contribution with the company. And then certainly if you were laid off, that was something that was beyond your control, particularly now with the times that we're going through. They should be understandable with that. And then maybe if you left to start your own business, you could just, let them know, I wanted to start an entrepreneurial journey. I wanted to start my own business. I did that for a while, and I'm just, maybe determining that at this time, I want to give my full effort, to a company, and maybe, the entrepreneur journey is not for me at this time. Whatever the reason is or whatever you want to say, just know you're going to have to answer that. You're going to have to give an answer. Just be prepared. And most of the time, if you have an answer, you're prepared and you say it confidently, that will suffice for the application, even in the interview, and it won't be that big of a deal. Okay, the next question is, what should I put when they're asked about desired salary? Well, number one thing that you want to do is make sure that you research, because I'm seeing companies asking that question on the interview is being mandatory. And on the application, it's being mandatory on the application because they want to kind of get that out of the way right up front. Right away, they want to know, is this person someone that we can afford? Can we afford to pay you what you're going to be asking for? And even if it's not on the application, they're going to ask you during the phone interview or certainly during the interview process, you're going to have to be prepared, right? So you definitely want to make sure that you research. And there's a number of ways you can research. You can go to salary.com. You can go to payscale.com. You can go to glassdoor.com, or you can just give a Google search. You can say, what is the salary for accountants in Atlanta, Georgia? And then you can just, do some research that way. And you can also do informational interviews. You can talk with people who are in the particular industry that you're in, and you can maybe ask them what would be the going salary rate for the job that you are applying for. But the key is to be prepared, and the key is to have a range. You don't ever want to just give a $1 amount. If you're looking to make about $80,000, I would say the salary range is $79,000 to $84,000. Maybe $1,000 below what you're looking for, then go up a couple of thousand. So you maybe have a little bit of wiggle room with your salary. So do the research in a number of places, come up with a dollar amount that you're looking to make or something you'd be comfortable with, and then give a range so that when you get to negotiation time, you'll have some wiggle room. Okay, another question that I get pretty frequently is it okay to put see resume anywhere on the application? And the answer is absolutely not. That goes back to what I said in the beginning. The application is where they're asking questions so they can figure out what they need from you. And so you cannot be lazy, with the application, and you want to fill it out as completely as possible. They're asking those questions for a reason, and they need to have these answers on file when they put the information, in your file when you get hired. And so they have to have this information. So you don't want to just put see resume. And I know a lot of times it is repetitive and you're having to say the same thing over and over, but that goes back to what I said before. Have it all written down, have it all typed up so you can readily just fill it in. You can readily just copy and paste, and it makes it a lot easier. So make sure that you are filling it out. Make sure you're putting the information, and nowhere on your resume do you put see see, nowhere on the application do you put see resume. Make sure you're filling it out and you're answering their questions. Okay, the next one is it okay to say that I don't want my current boss to be contacted? Absolutely, because if you're in the process of looking for a job, you may not want your current supervisor to know that you're looking for a job, right? Because that's going to raise a lot of red flags, and they may start wondering why you're trying to leave the company. So you can always let them know that you don't want your current boss to be contacted, and they should understand that. Now, if they ask you that for every single job, and every single job you say not to contact your supervisor, that may raise some red flags. So you may want to kind of think about that a little bit more. But the current supervisor, obviously, they should understand that you don't want that person to be contacted, and they should understand why. The next frequently asked question is, do I have to answer questions regarding ethnicity, sex, veteran status, or disability status, or whether I've received any kind of tax credit? And so, of course, with these, the answer is no. This should actually be on a separate part and not with the actual application. It should be separate because this is something that is not mandatory and something they cannot force you to answer. These are just voluntary questions. And most of the time, it'll say voluntary questions at the top, right? So when it comes to your ethnicity and your sex and, things like that, you can always answer it. Or you can put prefer not to answer, either way, but make sure, again, you fill it out. Either answer it or put prefer not to answer so they know you read the question and you didn't just skip over it. When it comes to veteran status or whether or not you received any kind of tax credit, I believe that companies get credit for hiring people who are veterans, and they get credit for hiring people who maybe, receive some kind of tax credit because of a natural disaster. I know that first came up when Hurricane Katrina first happened many years ago. I started seeing those questions on applications. So I believe companies get credit from the government whenever they hire people that fall into a certain category. So, again, you can answer it or not answer it, but that's the reason why they're putting it on there. And then, of course, with your disability status, they're asking you that question because they want to know if there are any special accommodations that they need to make for you to make sure that they level the playing field, so to speak, because they want to make sure that you have an equal opportunity just like everyone else. But again, you can answer the questions or you can choose to not answer, but at least make sure that you say you prefer not to answer. And a lot of times whenever they're asking about your sex and they're asking about your ethnicity, it's to ensure fair hiring practices. They want to make sure that they're hiring women. They want to make sure that they're hiring minorities, and things of that nature. So most of the time it's really just for fair hiring practices. But again, it's up to you whether or not you want to provide that information. Then the next question is, do I have to give my social security number and my driver's license number? Well, it depends. Sometimes on applications, they will make that mandatory for the social, and sometimes they will just ask you for the last 4 digits, so you can put that on there. And a lot of times they're going to associate that with you in your application because you're going to be given an application number or a candidate number, and so your social security number will be associated with that. And then a lot of times they're asking for your driver's license number if you have a job where you have to drive. If you have a job where you will be doing traveling for the company, maybe you're traveling around, meeting with clients and stakeholders in the region, and that's part of the requirements that you have a car, that you have a valid driver's license. That may be the reason why they're asking that. So that's the reason why they're asking. And then, of course, when it comes to background check, they may go ahead and ask you that information up front, so that whenever you get to the background check, they already have it and they don't have to come back and ask you again. So that's pretty much the reason why they're doing that. And then the next question is, what does the fine print on the applications really mean? Well, it's a number of things, but most of the time it means that when you're signing it and you're reading that fine print and you go to sign the application and date it at the end, you're basically saying that you are not knowingly giving false information. This information is truthful and it is accurate to the best of your ability. And then also you are sometimes authorizing them to do a background check, to do an employment history, and sometimes to even check your credit. So you definitely want to make sure that you're reading the application in its entirety. You want to make sure that you're reading the fine print, and you want to make sure that you are very clear on what you are signing and what you are authorizing. Then the next question is it okay to email my resume and cover letter to someone at the company and submit the application as well? And yes, you can do that, but you definitely want to make sure that you follow whatever instructions that they give. So if they're asking you to submit the application, then you definitely want to make sure you do that. And sometimes it will say no calls and no emails. And so if they're asking you not to call them and not to email them, then you don't want to do it anyway, because that will probably disqualify you, right? So make sure you're understanding the method that they want to be, contacted at. But obviously, if you know someone from the company, and you know someone that maybe can kind of help you get your foot in the door, and you want to apply for the application first and then follow up with your resume and your cover letter, then certainly you can do that. And then, it's also customary to reach out to someone on LinkedIn as well. Now, you want to be very careful how you do that, and you want to make sure that you're doing it professionally, and you want to make sure that you're not stalking the person that you are reaching out to. But there have been times where I have filled out an application, and then I found somebody that worked for that company on LinkedIn, and I just, very, very casually and very professionally introduce myself to them, let them know I just applied for the job, and sent my information, and kind of very subtly, ask them to take a look at it, or maybe, forward it on to the hiring manager or somebody in human resources. And I've gotten favorable results. But again, use your best judgment. Always be professional, and don't be too overbearing or too pushy whenever you are applying for jobs and as you're going throughout the job search process. The next question is, how long does it take to hear something after I have submitted my application? Well, again, it just depends. I know sometimes you don't really like to hear that, but in a lot of these cases, it does depend, and it just, it's scenario by scenario. I have to take it on a case-by-case basis. So sometimes you can apply for a job and you can hear something within 24 hours. I think the average is probably about a week, and sometimes it may take 3 or 4 weeks. A lot of times it really just depends on the company. If it's a larger company, it may take longer because it maybe has to go through more channels and go through more people. Sometimes it can depend on how soon they need someone. If they're looking to make a quick hire, then they may reply back to you, right away. And there's a lot of different factors that goes into it, but, you really have to be patient with the process. But on average, I would say about a week. I would definitely give it about a week before you start trying to follow up or start, trying to get more information. I would say really typically about a week's time. And the last tip that I want to give, is not really a frequently asked question, but I want to give this tip. Make sure that you proofread, before you submit, before you hit the send button. Take that extra minute or two to go back over your application, go back over all of your questions, make sure you didn't misspell anything, make sure you didn't leave anything off, and just take that extra time to proofread, because again, the application is part of your first impression. That's going to be the first time the employer may come in contact with you, and you want to do whatever you can to put your best foot forward and make yourself stand out over the other candidates. So don't be in such a rush. Don't be lazy throughout the process. Give yourself time to apply for each job and put your best foot forward. So thank you so much. That has been today's episode of From Dena's Desk, and I hope you found these tips helpful. Please comment below and let me know how they helped, and please tune in for next week's episode. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.